Hi, welcome to Script to Screen, and today we have Piers Henriquez, who is, well, your job title is Head of Comms at the National Association of Children of Alcoholics, is it?
Yeah, communications and marketing.
How are you today?
Yeah, not so bad. Yeah, good. Yeah, better for seeing you.
Right.
Just doing,
God, how long have we known each other now? A couple of years?
I don't know. Do you know what? I think I can put it down to a date almost. So
Go
I
on then.
think it was when Vicky Patterson did some promotion for us for COA week, which I think was probably just when we came out of lockdown. This was the first COA week since COVID that we were actually allowed to have events in person. And I think that was 23 because we
Yeah.
had we had a dodgy one on 22 when we had to do it all behind closed doors, like a parliamentary event. So it was either 23 or 22, so a good couple of years now. But you've done more than most, I tell you, in that time.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's nice to say. What is it that we've done? He said angling for some sort of testimony.
No, I would say you get tagged more than almost anyone else on our social media posts, being someone who's produced some of the a lot of the visual identity that the charity's taken on in the last couple of years. Even in a small, you might call it a small way, or I wouldn't think of it like that. Through like your animations and B-roll and how effective they can be in terms of like bringing out the color of a particular emotion that you're trying to describe, but also just simple things like the corporate, the animating the logo like you did, just puts our little seal of kind of the charity and little uh, yeah, it gives that kind of little moment of quality that we didn't have before, which you gave us. So thanks for that.
Th- Thanks for saying that. For those who don't know, could you just briefly just say what NACOA actually do? Because I think it's really important that people understand before we sort of go on.
Yeah, so NACOA stands for the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, which does kind of what it says on the tin. It's the national charity that gives support, advice, and information for anyone affected by a parent's drinking. And there's a few ways that we do that, but primarily it kind of centres around a helpline service. So it's a bit like the NSPCC or Childline is safeguarded for people of all ages, but especially children, to get in touch with helpline counsellors to speak to somebody, find a confidant, find information, speak to somebody who might have access to services in their area. Outside of that, we also work in schools. We do educational outreach programs. I think we see about 100, schools a year in terms of visits. And then on a wider sense, we do lots of publicity or kind of awareness raising around our issue as well. And that's on like social media, but also like TV, radio, and also public affairs stuff. So like in politics, trying to influence policy.
That it's a huge work that you do, and so valuable. I mean, the helpline itself, I think you have 25,000 children and young adults a year calling up, um, and what really touches me is I think there's a figure of something like there's 10% of those just want a bedtime story read to them.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I guess some of the sadder parts of our work is around the fact that you're dealing with long-term parental neglect that is uh, unaddressed, goes on unaddressed for long periods of time. Um, so yeah, so children get in touch, and if you walk into the helpline room in Bristol, you'll find that there's a big bookcase there, which it's just devoted to children's stories, and it's got all kinds of different ages and ranges. But yeah, kids have called over a long period of time to get a bedtime story or to get some sort of comfort from the service that they're not getting from home.
And what really strikes me about this this charity is that the people that we're dealing with aren't people who are involved. They're involved in second hand in the addiction, and they're struggling to cope with it with feelings of, well, typically of shame that my mother loves vodka more than she loves me, which you hear again and again. Um, so they're caught in the crosshairs of something, and trying to navigate that, and that's what the helpline is so important for, because the other feeling, of course, is I'm the only one dealing with this. I am alone, and that's what the helpline does. and does so well.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, yeah. Like our particular issue is quite is quite a specific kind of challenge to deal with because, like you say, alcohol is a public good in a sense. You know, people use it that way, or it's defined in our culture as something that people see as a good thing, but it is highly addictive and causes massive uh, collateral damage on all kinds of fronts. But when it comes to addiction in the home, the children are on the front line, and the people who are experiencing addiction or going through it, they feel lots of shame and that they're stigmatized, they can't speak about it, or they don't want it to be known outside the household. So therefore, children become even more isolated than they would be in almost any other statutory abuse situation,
Ah,
because the family uh, they create a conspiracy of silence, which stops people from actively seeking help, unless that kind of silence is broken somehow. And NCOA exists as a helpline, and it does that not as a kind of a compromise, but as a necessity. Because what a helpline gives you is it hands all of the power over to the user. Because if you are going to access help remotely, you do have all the cards in your hand in the sense that you don't have to walk underneath a door where above it says I'm a child of an alcoholic, or sign a kind of a waiver form to say I've got permission to be able to be here. If you have access to the internet and a phone and some sort of portal to the information that is just available there, which is healthy and good and evidence based for kids, then they can get it to whatever degree they want, and that can go from as little as going to the website, finding some information, and being essentially a passive user of the service, or calling up and saying I need help, please find someone for me now, and we will do that as well.
so moving on to the funding of NGOs, that's been eroded over the past decade, hasn't it? Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a bumpy picture, obviously, as like charities will know. Anyone who's in the charity sector will know that it's not a straightforward picture when it comes to overall funding, either from like government, statutory, or even from grants and kind of trust funds that kind of exist out there. Yeah, NCOA has kind of grown over time, but only because of popular support. In terms of government activity or presence within our particular field, there is next to nothing. The only time you can qualify for any kind of help or some kind of funding from government if your parent is using alcohol or even drugs problematically is if your parent is either if you've ended up in some sort of social care situation or your parent is in some form of recovery. And if you're not in that category, which is 82% minimum in terms
Right.
of UK population of children of alcoholics, then you're left to the wind, basically. And the coexist as a kind of an answer to that, as a kind of a community response. But the only way we do that is through lots of kind of very diverse approach to fundraising, which includes like memberships. So that's people who pay regular donations but take an active part in the charity. Regular donations, corporate sponsorship, corporate membership. Grant funding, these kinds of things, but it's all got to kind of come together to be able to form, what is our budget for the year.
And as head of comms for a charity, you think that other charities are experiencing this sort of erosion of their funding?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very unusual for charity to exist, I would argue, without any sort of government funding. Most charity, a very, very, very large part of the whole UK charity sector will be funded primarily, if not exclusively, from government in some form or another through like local authority spending or what have you. But yeah, I mean, other charities. I mean, charities. So the sector is always in a sort of a form of flux and crisis because that's kind of the nature of it a little bit because you're essentially relying on generosity in order for you to keep the lights on. Yeah, I mean, I think people have seen we've seen local authority spending slashed over, since 2008. and I don't think that's any different now. Sometimes you get little spikes and little dips. But actually, in terms of the grant funding situation in the UK, it has got markedly worse. And as they've consolidated, or people have removed themselves from the picture altogether, yeah, charities are competing. Greater number of charities are competing for smaller and smaller pots.
Right. Yes, it's interesting that dynamic, because I always think of it. I don't see charities as competing for a pot. I see them as sort
Yeah,
of standalone, siloed. But of course, so so my personal belief is that animation is a fantastic way to communicate complex ideas in a creative and relatable way. The barriers, the fears, uncertainties, and doubts to using animation have been traditionally the cost. Animation's been really expensive, but with the advent of AI, that cost barrier is has eroded a lot. We can, of course, produce £200,000 commercials for £50,000, but we can also produce um, uh, commercials or promotional videos that would have cost £10,000 for £5,000, and sometimes even less than that. The other advantage is with AI that you can slice and dice them into 15, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. You can take stills out of them. You can repurpose them into different languages, and so on and so forth. And I mean, I think that the best thing we've ever done was the animation Sam story that we did for you just before Christmas of this year. Um, what could you tell us? What is your thinking around animation, and the way that it can communicate, perhaps better than a pamphlet, better than text, the qualia that is involved in animation, that it can communicate again in a creative, relatable way.
yeah. I mean, it's a really good. I think the kind of the narrative arc you just went on is more or less one that I recognised over a long period of time with Nakoa, because we've always wanted to have relatable, accessible, colourful resources to show children and young people, to be able to help to kind of to take some of the steam out of the issue, to help people feel better about the fact, what it is that they're talking about, which can sometimes be distressing and worrying, and you want to help people to feel better. And animation is a really good way to do that. Because you can relate it to cartoons, I suppose, to an extent, but then you can also kind of anthropomorphize the world around the young person to help them to sort of engage, or to feel like they're to represent the kind of the way that they engage with the world, which might be more creative than your adult grey view of the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, over time it's always been difficult. We've always dreamed of having people come along and give pro bono support, but it was just far too outlandish to think that anybody could sit down and animate cell after cell after cell of some sort of cartoon. And I'm thinking back now to like maybe even the 90s or noughties. But yeah, and so I'm just to fast forward, then we met you, and and since then our kind of offering, our video offering, has expanded exponentially anyway, in the form of podcasts and different kinds of marketing that are video based. But actually meeting you and working with you on a few different projects, but culminating in Sam's story, has been a kind of a really has offered a really interesting kind of gear shift, I think, because it's allowed us to think about not just using an animation piece as a one-off that helps to break an issue to a school classroom is invaluable, and you're going to be touching so many lives by doing that. But then also you can use that to colour points that people are making on a podcast. So you can bring out kind of a small 5-second moment of conversation and bring animation to it to do exactly what we were just talking about at the beginning, where you have a kind of what is essentially a textual world. You bring it to life using that animation, which gives a kind of an emotional, spontaneous, creative view of the world, and and that makes a huge difference. Not just in terms of like I feel better for seeing it; it's more interesting to me, but it also keeps people's eyeballs on it and makes for more successful content. Yeah, and I feel like I'm going on a bit, but yeah, there's a lot to talk about, certainly on that front. In terms of charities as well, I think it's potentially underutilized, especially with people who've got budgets for it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know. I mean, obviously, we work in the United States as well, and the US budgets for these things is a lot. They have a lot more revenue stream because the taxation system, in large part, allows people to be philanthropists and get tax breaks accordingly. So, if you go to the Forbes top 100 charities, they have revenue streams in the billions of dollars, whereas the UK equivalent would they've got a roll of sellotape and a stapler, basically. you know, to push too fine a point on it. So, but 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 every charity wants to cut through the noise. And to your earlier point, that we shouldn't see charities as siloed in their own with their own objectives. There is a notional pot of money which can be people can get access to it. In order to do that, you have to advocate for your cause over and above other causes, which just seems awful, but that's the way it is. And so to that end, the better you can make your case, and the better it is, the more, let's be frank, the more money you receive in terms of fundraising, and animation can make that more possible.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, so like in terms of, so the one thing that COA has really going for it, as an example case for what you're just saying, is we are highly differentiated. There's not really anyone else who does what we do, and in a way that's because of the service, and because it's kind of, there have been custodians of the charity that have refused to budge on certain things or kind of get bent out of shape in order to find the nearest and most fashionable potentially pot of money. But also, yeah, like I think you have, we can sort of stand up and say, this is a charity that is kind of pretty much unique. Even if you look around the world, it's unusual to find a charity like ours, and that helps when it comes to fundraising, and because people will be looking for you and they'll find you, and so it's a really good search and find. When people do search for you and they find you, they need to feel seen by you, and that's another thing. That's the sort of third kind of secret part that we do well. And undoubtedly, like with things like animation or kind of very, very sort of targeted video or marketing material, you can create that sense. And it can work on a few different things, like corporate, sort of direct to consumer or like outreach, and also in the form of like, just marketing, basically.
Is there a case that I mean, one of the things which always amazes me about Nakara is I don't understand why a huge bank or a huge oil and gas multinational doesn't just throw money at you in order to make these children's lives better. I just don't see a downside of it. But the better you're marketing yourselves, if there was a watermark top right hand side saying XYZ Bank or XYZ company, the better you're marketing yourselves, the higher profile you have, the more a particular person who is providing charitable funding would bask in the reflective glory of your success as well. So, to be perfectly frank, they're going to get more out of it than just giving you some money.
Yeah, totally, yeah. So that's what you're building over a long period of time, isn't it? Reputation, I suppose, and credibility, which again, animation does actually do for you. If you see something that looks so impressive and so wonderful and brings out the issue, then you think, oh, that charity must have something about them. In terms of the banks and the COA and who we are, and I think it's a complete no-brainer. These are the innocent victims of drinking addiction. It makes total sense, and I think that on a public policy point of view as well, I have no idea why government fight tooth and nail to not have to deal with this issue. Sorry, excuse me. But they do. Government don't want to fund this area. I think they think that it's a bit of a Pandora's box. But when it comes to corporates and potential big funders or large funders, what they're looking for sometimes is, say Mr. Barclays, they're looking around for charity to give money to. They might go, okay, we're interested in kids. We want to help children, like underprivileged children. And someone might say, oh, how about children of alcoholics? Well, they go like, sorry, what? Like, and they might, and that sorry what moment needs to go one of two ways. One is someone says, oh, well, children are really badly affected by alcohol, and they go, okay, well maybe let's look into that. It seems a bit niche. The other way is someone goes, don't be so silly, and they're always considered as a kind of a quackery or something that's too difficult to deal with. So we're obviously trying to influence like the kind of the wider approach, the approach that we'd want people to see, which is that there is a wider issue that is very prevalent in society. It's not actually particularly niche. It's something that is very widespread around the UK. But that hasn't happened in the past. So I've been around NGOs my whole life. Like my mum started NGOs. When about 10, 15 years ago, this was kind of wildly out there. It's on its journey. It's in its completely nascent journey. There's only really people that knew that would really be interested, yet alone like a corporate who might have interest in the alcohol industry and hospitality and all these kinds of people who feel like they've got kind of a stake in alcohol in any form or another. I think it's over time that's changed, and corporates are getting behind us more, and they're willing to take that leap. But it needs a push, and it's definitely not there in terms of like people throwing money at us. That's definitely not how it goes right now. Especially when you got like other charities that are a bit more sanitized or ready off the shelf. Kind of like if you go to one of the big mental health charities, you know what you're going to get. Whereas with us, you're looking at a small charity that kind of has a good reputation, but it kind of says something about you if you support us, which maybe people would like or they don't like, But like say but some of our bigger funders, I don't know if I should mention them, but like say like for example Iceland, I would say so Iceland Foods are supporters of ours and they've been amazing since they kicked off the schools campaign with us in 2024, and I think I can speak for them in saying that they love the fact that they get a lot of good attention for it. Lots of good social media attention, lots of good media attention, and they are kind of front and center of the charity's appreciation. And there they are, they could have gone with a bigger charity which maybe wouldn't give them anything like the attention we give them. But yeah, they can bask in that glory because they've done amazing work, and because with a small charity, especially when you've got untapped potential like we do, like a big volunteer base, but it's just resources that hold you back. If you just unleash it a bit, then there's so much good you can create in such a small amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just going to look over to Billy now. And Billy, what have you got thoughts around this? Billy was made head of marketing last week, by the way.
Yeah, I heard this. Yeah, congratulations, man.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, now as sort of channeling my inner head of marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could do something on like I suppose you've worked personally with Nicole, for a long time, and obviously Quint you have as well. I'd say maybe like if there was one thing that you would suggest to other charities in a similar position, both either in the UK or the US or whatever, like sort of that idea of making use of even if you don't have much funding but you have a large volunteer base, or what is the one piece of advice you'd give them in order to really boost their own awareness?
Yeah, I mean, I really like that idea of you unlocking the potential of what if you just had resources, how much more you could do. It's just a question of catalyzing that.
Yeah.
Shall I feed you a question? Are you happy to? You're just happy to
Yeah,
talk.
you can feed me a question if you want it on the audio or whatever. That's fine.
So given what we've talked about, I mean, is there any advice or any thoughts you have on how best charities could catalyze change, raise awareness, given your experience working with animation and video?
Yeah, so I think the secret to if I want to call it that, the secret to my part in the success of NGOs is relating language to personal experience. You don't. It's so off-putting when people talk in clinical jargon to almost anybody. I don't know. The only people who enjoy clinical jargon are the jargonistas, people who enjoy speaking to themselves in that kind of code. And charities make the mistake. I often see this, even small charities, very often because their funding pot is coming from jargonistas. But I see small charities falling into the trap of feeling like they have to speak as if they're speaking on behalf of a big NGO, that they have to protect themselves through essentially creating a wall of kind of noise, or a wall of kind of a respectable language which doesn't really make any sense to the common person. So I always think that the thing we've done really well, which I think stands up over time, is just being a platform for people to speak in their own language about their own experiences. And people don't do that enough in the charity sector. They really don't do that enough.
I remember, just as a sidebar, I remember we were talking about LLMs, and you were getting people to provide their story written from the heart. And they were running through LLMs, and out was popping this GPT speak or Anthropic speak.
Totally.
The listener from connect, and that made them unable to connect to what was being said.
Yeah, that's so true. So there's a kind of all within that. There's quite a big dynamic to sift through, I think, actually. But, so how do you put this? Like, I think just going back on myself a little bit. I do genuinely believe that people say the word, like, so they'll throw the word empathy around in kind of how to speak manuals, which basically means like kind of trying to endlessly kind of break apart words and create kind of clinical language, which apparently is empathetic, but all it's really doing is reducing like the meaning, and it's kind of breaking apart words in order to sort of feel like you're kind of correcting them.
Yeah,
that's just an opinion. But the next bit is, I think they're like the word empathy comes from the term "einfühlung," which means I see, and the kind of the origin is really like the empathy is that if you're approaching a hill and you see the hill coming up, your personal body, you'll say, I see the hill rising, and the hill's not rising, but as you're walking towards the hill appears like it's rising.
Mm-hmm.
That is empathy, and that's because you're a body moving through time, speaking in an imperfect way. But what you do is you give the impression of something that is deeply felt, which is that the hill is rising. And I feel like that about language as well. Like, you can't sterilize a language of experience, really, and effectively communicate at the same time. And so, therefore, that kind of the hill is rising when it's definitely not rising is also something you need to do when you're talking about personal experience. You just allow kind of broken bits to fall around, imperfect phraseologies to come together in order to create a feeling of what it was like to go through this particular experience. And I think empathetic language, where empathy towards language is actually not about kind of giving, it's about receiving. And if you can create that kind of receipt which impacts people enough, then your language and also your text and your animations and your videos will be impactful. And you look at people on social media doing really well, they're almost always people who've kind of got some sort of brokenness about the way they communicate, but the way they do it has such a big impact that people relate, and it becomes exponential.
How interesting. How interesting. Yeah.
And the same goes for the helpline as well, is that the helpline has always said that it always mirrors language. It doesn't. The whole point is that if somebody calls up and they say, I've got a father with alcohol misuse disorder, they'll say, I'm so sorry to hear that your father's got alcohol misuse disorder. Whereas if you come up and say, my ma is, an alcoholic, then you'd respect that and you'd use that form of phraseology. I mean, that's kind of just getting into kind of the very basics of it. But empathy is kind of received by kind of listening and then potentially giving back, or giving a kind of representation through the form of dialogue, I suppose.
Maybe that's the way that animation helps, because animation is a form of language. It's not vocabulary, but it's a sort that if you were visually literate like that, if the person's experiences using language to prescribe and describe their world, then animation comes in and provides you another way of accessing it, through symbolism, through metaphor, through allegories, and through fables, and allows a person to not directly be impacted by it, but to let it sort of more amorphously sort of present some ideas in a relatable way that allow another narrative to happen, especially if you're going to try and diffuse shame or address loneliness, which are obviously very uncomfortable things. You don't want to hit the person. exactly, listen to my language. You don't want to address it in a way which is confrontative and challenging. You just want to hold the person's hand, in this case a child's hand, and lead them into an area where these things can be discussed on a helpline.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just take like a little while ago, I was looking around for. I was editing a clip for the podcast, and I was looking for something that could help me to represent the kind of the subconscious around dysfunctional parental behaviour. I think, which is something I look at a lot. And I was casting around trying to find some sort of video to use, and I ended up landing on your iceberg.
Yeah.
And it's like a buoy, isn't it? I think the buoys ended up kind of falling into the water, and then the iceberg just goes down and down and down.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like, it's an extension of the. Sorry to go back to my original. The hill rises. Is that okay? That's quite a kind of. It's quite a sort of temporal example, because you can imagine yourself being in a place which is like limited by physics. But if you release that world, and then you can allow yourself to see beneath the surface, and then create whatever you want, which is a kind of an endlessly deep iceberg that is otherwise quite difficult to visualize, you can represent something that is so much greater than you might otherwise be able to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where it's just so perfect. And animation as a kind of a way of kind of communicating something that is, colourful and emotive, but also kind of super sensorious. That is something super sensuous beyond what you can see in the world, but it's actually one of the most important things that you'll ever experience in life, which is, deep sense of personhood and kind of relationship with others.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think the best of it. I mean, if it's, good old Walt managed to do that, with Bambi and Dumbo and Snow White and Mickey Mouse and the gang. That to provide. I mean, if you just look at children's animation, for example, and how successful that is. In fact, how successful animation is in popular entertainment with things like Frozen and the Marvel's cinematic universe, you could argue as well. That you enter into a semi sort of dreamlike state where the person is seduced. I mean, if we take, in my psychoanalytic or psychotherapeutic experience, when we're dealing with trauma, the last thing you'd want to do is to show somebody who'd been through a traumatic car crash, literally a video of a car crash, because the chances are it's too on the nose, you're going to trigger them. But you can address the feelings around the things that they've experienced. If we can say that trauma, in a sense, is them being lost to words, so they can't actually provide a narrative in order to try and process what's going on. But you can provide something that is another form of language in which they can provide a narrative that they can somehow address it. Does that make sense? Sorry,
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think, what is it that like brings, my daughter is watching Netflix on kind of a loop. If you could possibly let her, she would sit there and watch it all day, and they all gravitate back to animated series. I mean, obviously a lot of it's 3D these days, but and I suppose, what is it that they're feeling from it? And I suppose if I look at my daughter, she gets like a really strong sense of like personal drama out of it. Like she's sort of understanding how to sort of she's seeing what she feels, which is quite an intense, dramatic, kind of colourful, kind of potentially unbridled way of seeing the world, like the kids do. And we all kind of have that inside us as well. I mean, I think still in there. I mean, but potentially we kind of lock it up a bit. But kids are seeing that world so raw that animation is perfect for them. And that would go the same for kind of therapeutic environments, as well as kind of just entertainment or anything that helps people to sort of understand their internal flux.
Yeah, Yeah, and maybe gives them a language, a way of getting out of the rote in the rut and the rote that they're in, the traditional ways of thinking about it, the obsessive ways of focusing on something that's kept them locked. They can't see another perspective. They can't see another way out. And in a kind of a dreamlike way, maybe it's, I mean, so without getting sort of too Carl Jung about the whole thing, you know, your shadow side is coming through there. There are alternatives. There are always alternatives, even just to get a distance on it, you know, to be in the audience looking at the film rather than feeling you're in the film, to use a sort of an overused a cliche. Billy, thoughts?
My mate Josh, you know Josh Connolly,
Yes, yes.
he said something to me once that's really landed about our issue and when people speak about it. And he said, because we have real problems. Whenever we have events, people are terrified they're not going to have enough to say. They'll say, I've got like, I can't speak for 5 minutes, I can't speak for 10 minutes, I don't know what I want to say. The problem is you put them on stage and they will not stop talking. And you're often looking at your watch going, oh my God, it's like 25 minutes. They came for 5 minutes, they've been up to 25 minutes. What are we going to do? And like you're kind of desperately trying to like just look at them, just will them with your eyes to get off stage, you know, so and get on with the lunch or whatever it is that you've got like ready to go. You know, all the people waiting in the wings. But Josh said so really landed me and really helped me understand. He said that when people go up there and start speaking about personal experiences like this, they go into a dream state. And so it's really about how well they can control that dream state, that they can get out of it. Because people will just, they'll lose themselves because they're talking about something which is in the past, which kind of probably has deeper relationship and deeper connection now to their dream state than to their present, you know,
Yeah.
conscious state.
Yeah.
And then your question is about this person is, how much control does this person have over their dream state?
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, so it's all kind of so therefore I suppose if people had good kind of way of kind of understanding their experiences as animation, they'll also be good public speakers. Therefore, I don't know how that works, but
Yeah.
but yeah, somehow there's a connection there.
Billy, can I throw to you? Cameras off. Have you got any more thoughts just as before we wrap this up?
Really?
Oh.
No, I think.
How
what you guys-
disappointing.
No, what you're saying about the whole Netflix thing and the sort of that sort of speaking to emotions that you can't quite sort of articulate. I mean, I think that's just beautiful, and it really just sums up why we do all of this anyway. You know, why the colour red means anger, why the colour blue means sort of safety and everything like that. No, can't really improve on perfection.
Oh.
No, totally. The one thing I was thinking ahead of this was about, well, a little bit about all of that as well, like the qualia and the ineffable and all these kinds of things, but also just like what it was like working with animation.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you want to talk about that or if you wanted to ask a question on that, because I was quite interested looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, like how the production process went. What was it like working with us? You know, working with a production company.
Oh, you mean something along those lines? Oh, all right. So, Piers, can I just ask, in sort of wash-up style, what was it like working with us as a client on the animation?
Yeah, I mean, I've loved working with you over all these years. We've been collaborating and like deeply appreciative, and I hope you know that. And it just happens that you've got a really nice aesthetic appreciation, I think, of our work, and have brought something which is kind of new but also sympathetic to what's gone before. So working with a new production company, that's kind of what you're looking for straight away, is do these people get it, and are they able to kind of fit into a kind of a sympathetic rhythm before they start to go on and try and revolutionise whatever it is that you do through their own particular skill or medium. And so it's always a pleasure. And then when you came to me about Sam's story, or when you came to me with the potential of doing a piece for COAV, I was obviously delighted, because we've wanted to do an animation for a long time, but have felt hamstrung through a lack of resources or a lack of funds that we could put behind any particular project. But yeah, you worked it up yourself in conversation with me, and had kind of pitched it as a kind of essentially an AI production. And like, I'm totally fine with that. That sounds, interesting and good potentially. But I suppose I'm like everybody else. I've seen so much rubbish AI animation that I do feel like, an overly smooth, weirdly moving kind of sort of floating sort of version of an animation is not that attractive to me. And almost, if it was done badly, could be actually more of a hindrance than a help if someone delivered you something that was like bad at AI animation. But obviously, I trusted you, so we went with it. We spoke with your team about kind of a narrative that could come out. And we worked out what the kind of the shape would be, which essentially is not an AI production. It was essentially a kind of a narrative we threaded together about what it's like for a child going through this, what we can't very easily put on to camera, without hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
You can't go and get the real story from the real child because that's highly unethical. But you can represent it in this kind of animation form. So we said, what is it that people go through in the worst situation, and what is the kind of the resolution that Nicole is offering? And then we kind of, shaped some ideas, and we talked about balloons and these symbols that we've used over time, which relatable, helpful, in order to kind of create a sense of an intervention in the life of somebody who's isolated and in the dark and alone. And then, but when you delivered it, I just couldn't believe it, because it looked so good and so unlike those kind of overly smooth, weirdly colourful, kind of sort of physics-defying animations that you see elsewhere.
Yes.
And I suppose and you kept saying, well, it's AI, it's just like prompts, and I was like, it's not. It's definitely not. I can see like the skill and the eye that's in there, which is not just a computer. I don't know how you feel about that. Do you still think that it's just all dead easy? I mean, I saw so much human control and kind of creativity and kind of artistry in that. But then you were saying that a lot of it was basically done through software.
Well, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and that the person behind that was Lucien De Vivo, who's a very, very talented creative guy, and he's a traditional animator of many years standing, and we as a company have had to lean into AI because our clients are asking for it. And I did try and, like King Canute, try and stop the incoming tide, but it didn't work. And now we have embraced AI. But what we are trying to do is get away from the AI slop that is so prevalent out there. And one way of doing that is to create this hybrid approach where we're using traditional or hybridizing, using traditional animation with AI in order to enhance and augment the animation approach, which still the client enjoys the cost savings, but we still get the impact of traditional animation. But the creative, I really can't take any credit for that. That's all on Lucien, and any projects like that would be in the hands of our creative team, which number 6 senior creatives and a raft of animators, both here and in the United States, who can make these projects come to life. But yes, what I'm really what I'm really keen to do, and what Lucien clearly can produce, is this connection that allows that is beyond words, that has some resonance that just that Walt used to do, that whether you have Bambi or whether you have Dumbo or whether you have Snow White or Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse, that you enter into another realm. You enter into this sort of liminal space where the symbolic and the metaphor are there, and you suspend something that's in your prefrontal cortex, and you just absorb it and watch it, and then after the fact, post hoc, you maybe rationalize it. But that's enough time for you to gain some distance, for example, on a situation, and the god awful situation that some of the kids are that call the helpline are in, is they need that, and if that prompts them to call you up and to talk to one of your brilliant phone help people, then thank God for that. Let's lean into that and find out how we can do it better.
Yeah, but like what Lucien did really well was was not a long conversation. I think maybe originally there was a kind of a pitch sent to me, and I liked it, and then had some thoughts about it. We had a conversation for about half an hour, and obviously the skill on this guy is obviously pretty special in terms of creating pictures that move in moving ways. But to get there as well, you had to listen quite hard for like half an hour because everything we talked about came out so beautifully. So that's why I see this kind of still very sort of intrinsically creative and basically human side to this AI.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's important too. Is to talk from the heart, to talk authentically, and to get away from the jargonistas. As we were saying, to stop that bullshit coming in, and start to pepper it, which is also easy in the sort of quasi medical area. It's all too easy to start talking about dopamine pathways and Christ knows what all else. Attachment theory. But what we're talking about is booze and how it affects people in their relationship to their parents, and that's visceral enough as it is, without trying to. I mean, maybe that's what we try to do with language. Well, obviously, it's sometimes with language is to gain some distance from it and get away from the pain of it. But listen, Piers, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I can see there's a child creeping in there, one of your own. Hello.
Give me 10 minutes, love.
No.
Give me 10 minutes. I'll come back, all right? Love you.
Piers, can I thank you?
I had a little point I was going to throw in there. What it was. That was one thing. I just want to say one more thing, which is just because of the animation stuff, and I'd forgotten to say, is like you were saying about the visceral enough, something being visceral enough and difficult enough.
Yeah.
One of the big jobs we have as a charity is to make it approachable, and and therefore actually the visceral reality is not what you want to represent.
Yeah.
That's where this kind of animation, or where some Lucian or Quint or whoever it might be comes in and makes it approachable, and therefore breaks open the whole case. That's the key for that's I'm constantly concerned about basically with how to kind of present our issue and how to make it accessible to people and feel good about dealing with it, and that's what you guys have brought to us. So thanks for that. And like Sam's story, as a final point, Sam's story is going out into schools every day almost. So probably Sam's story has probably been shown today in a school. And if you've ever been to one of those school visits, you can see that very, very many kids are moved visibly when you go into a school and start showing them this information. And it's not like a big, serious kind of we've kind of broken this kid's brain apart to the point where he's not going to be able to function anymore. It's actually just that they've just recognised themselves in a moment, and how important that is, and how crucial that should be for a school career to have that at least once if you're dealing with this stuff at home. Something like Sam's story helps basically you to get into a school, and then you have some information which is easy to digest, not massively sensational, but makes a difference. And that's what you guys have given through this, and that it helps in so many ways, but that is the number one for me, is that it goes out into schools and it actually changes lives. And without the style and the skill and the shaping that you guys have given, the craftsmanship that you brought to it, that just won't be happening. So.
And what can you put a figure on that? How many people have seen it?
I mean, if you take B-roll, millions, many millions.
Millions.
Yeah, we get 1 million views a year, a month on Instagram. So and then and then Facebook every now and then pops off, and we're always using your content as B-roll because you've generously gifted it to us. The video itself on YouTube has had several thousand, and then we keep going. And when we show it in schools, you're seeing so the school population. Sam's story's only been around for a couple of months, but it will have been shown to hundreds, if not thousands, of students at this point. In the form of assemblies and school presentations. But last year we had it was a student population of 120,000 saw a NGOs presentation.
Right.
Number of kids. Now that goes into a college age as well, but if you think about 120,000 people, what that looks like in a stadium. And and then it'll be the same, if not a lot more, this year, and then again and again and again. So you kind of have levels of this. You have the B-roll, we have millions, but then you have a really, really crucial, important audience, which is those kids in the schools. And still, you're seeing thousands of kids, if not hundreds of thousands, every
Well, it
year.
warms my heart. Warms my heart to hear it, Piers. It really does. It's so important what you do, and
Yeah, likewise,
it's
man.
been great to be part of it, and to try and support you, and obviously ongoing in any way we can. Listen, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I know you're suffering with a cold there, and you're wrangling. Well,
Fancy
but
kids.
thanks very much for taking the time to talk to me,
You're welcome.
and yeah, and speak soon, no doubt. Take care.
Thanks, man.